We often think of conflict as an emotional or relational issue, but what if it's also a health risk? In this episode, we're unpacking what really happens inside your body during conflict, because it's not just about raised voices or awkward tension. Conflict hijacks your nervous system. It triggers a stress loop that floods your body with cortisol, spikes your heart rate, and keeps you locked in a fight-flight mode long after the conversation ends. Over time, that loop becomes a constant background noise of your life. The result is poor sleep, low energy, weight gain, brain fog, even higher risk of heart disease and early death. One major study found that men facing frequent family conflict had up to 3 times the risk of dying early. Now, the goal here isn't to scare you, it's to show you that conflict doesn't have to hijack your health or your life. We have more control than you think. We're going to explore how to interrupt that stress loop, reset your system, and start engaging in conflict with more clarity and control. We're going to give you 3 kinds of key questions you must ask if you want to resolve conflict to protect your energy, your relationships, and your long-term health. So let's get into it. Dr. Teplow, what can we do about this conflict stress loop that we have in our lives?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And interestingly, when the usual ways we start with solving conflict is to think of what strategy can I use? Even the modern question, what's even the smallest step? Because we know take small steps, don't bite off more than you can chew. And that's the way to do it. And actually, that perpetuates that stress loop, because as soon as we think, what can we do? Even if it's tiny, that part of our brain that's activated is the part that's all involved with judgment, with analysis, and falls into that trap of cost. So when we are thinking about change or what we can do, we immediately are considering the cost of time, of money, of course, physical effort, mental effort, even being different than everybody else. I could never do that. We've never done it before. And that's what happens when we start thinking about what can I do, even if it's small. So that just keeps us going in that kind of conflict, enmeshment, icky stuff. So we have to do something different. And that is, we have to start at the end, not the tiny step that we can do. Glenn, you said something about the 3 kinds of questions we need to ask. The first question we need to ask when we start at the end is, what is the outcome we want?
And that's what we want to start at, because if we don't, we're like you said, we're getting in this action mode. This is where we know that we get tense, our muscles tense up. We really have a physiological effect. Our heart rate goes up. We start sending signals to our brain that, hey, we're under threat here. And what you're saying here is that by asking this question of what do we want, where do we want to end up, we're able to skip over that part and work our way back.
Exactly. And it's not that tiny step, what's the very first smallest step you can take? It's not that that's a wrong question. It is a crucial question. The point is timing. And we know from very recent brain imaging the difference between what's even the smallest thing I can do that lights up all that brain that's responsible, as I said, for analyzing and problem solving, etc., versus what is my dream? What is the outcome that I would love to see happen? That is processed in a very different part of the brain. Your imagination and your creativity become activated with that. And no, you can't be creative and use your imagination if you aren't feeling safe. So that kind of question of, what is your dream? What's the outcome that you would be pleased to see? And I think that I'm using that language very carefully, because it's not what's the outcome I want, but it's what is the outcome that I'd be pleased to see. Because when we're talking about what drives, what are the fundamental motivators of human beings? Pain and pleasure, right? Fear and disgust, all that. Yeah. So when I ask, what would I be pleased to see? And if we're in conflict with another person, what collectively, what would we be, when we talk about even arriving at an outcome that we're both pleased with, what would we be doing? And so you're no longer arguing against the strategy or the tactic, but you're really dreaming. and that calms you, it also unleashes lots more creativity and the potential for many more solutions to come into your, come to mind than just if you're arguing about what strategy to use, even if it's a tiny strategy.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And that's the step where if you react right away, like, oh, I need to do something, you don't even know where you're going. Of course, that's just basically running away. That's the fight or flight that's coming, and you're just like, I just need to do something. And then the next step was, well, what do I want out of this? But you're saying even one step further, because where I want is still putting me in that really tight thinking of where I want to go with what would please me or what would please both of us is opening up that creativity.
Exactly.
And how do we do that? How do we do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. For the first one is thinking about what is your shared dream. So if you're in conflict with somebody, even if you're in conflict with yourself, what's that dream? What's that shared dream? What's your individual dream? What's the shared dream? What would be different? And again, what would you be pleased to see yourself doing? What would you be pleased to see you doing with the other person that would tell you you'd been a success? So you're bypassing or catapulting over. We talked about a brick wall. So the brick wall is the cost of change. We're here with conflict, icky stuff. This brick wall is it won't work. It's too much effort. They're a jerk. I'm too tired. I have already enough work. All of that. This is the cost. When we say, what do we want? What would we be pleased to see in the future right here that would tell us we've done a good job managing this conflict? All of a sudden this drops away, and now we're in possibility land. And so that first question is, very coarsely, what do you want? And then to get to that is, what difference will it make? And I think that that's really crucial, because when you start talking about what difference it will make, you start again imagining how life will be when it's better.
And like you said, it takes away some of the tactics and the way we're going to go about things, or how they might want to get to it versus I want to get to it. And when we go to that, what difference what do we want? What difference is it going to make for both of us? Then there's a lot of different paths to that same.
Absolutely.
And your path, and even though if I'm arguing with you, Deborah, your path, I don't care as much about your path, because we're both getting to the outcome that we want. So you can take your path, I can take my path, whatever the way it came. Or I'm happy to take your path, because we're both getting to that same spot.
Exactly. And I think one simple example that you'll appreciate is that my husband loves beaches for vacation, and that's the last thing I want to do is sit in the sun and sand. I want to go hiking in mountains, steep mountains. And so we could argue back and forth. He wants to go to, the Jersey Shore, let's say, because we live in Jersey. I want to go, to the high mountains. And we could have this tug of war back and forth until we say, well, wait, my dream is sitting on the beach with mountains behind me. So you could hike, I could sit on the beach. So then it opens up possibilities. Where are there places where there's, beach and mountains instead of just, this destination, that destination? It's about the outcome of having reached that destination. Or you could go one farther is, and what difference would that make if you were to get your beach or I was to get my mountains? Well, I'd have a vacation that included strenuous exercise that I love. And he'd get a vacation that was relaxing. He wants to just relax. Then where could we go where I can get strenuous exercise outdoors and he can relax? All different, you can see the possibilities expanding from that discussion. I want to go to the Jersey Shore. I want to go to the Rockies.
So it's not the tactic of the beach or the mountains. It's the difference that it will make. And that's just the unlock.
Absolutely.
But you have to know what you want. I mean, that's the question that you have to ask yourself is like, what do I really want? And in this conflict.
Yeah. And I think when you said, what do I really want? I think that's really key, because we say, oh, I want this or that. When we ask, and what difference will it make? Then we realize it's easier to say, well, what am I fighting for? And what difference will it make? So if I'm having, a heated discussion, my poor husband, with I want this, I want that, and what difference will it make? Sometimes you realize, well, that thing isn't that important. And I can, it's not give in, but I can accept, okay, that's what we'll do. And keep focusing on the difference it will make, and the difference it will make to you in terms of quality of life and who you'll be, what you stand for. I think that's important when you project forward, visualize yourself in that future place, having resolved the conflict. Who are you? What do you stand for? And how do people see you? How do you want to be seen? And most people don't want to be seen as, shrieking, out of control, raging people.
Right. In the
Yeah.
stress loop, in that stress loop. So the first question to get out of the stress loop is, what do you want? What's the next question that we want to ask to get out of the
And
stress loop?
this second question is super, super um, fun. And I'm going to use the word healing, may not be the right thing, but when you're in a conflict, it can be very raw. The second question is, what do you already have? What's already working? And you can say nothing. That person is such a jerk or an idiot, your favorite words,
Yeah.
right? And, or blah, but what do you have? What's already working? Well, the fact that you've made a time to talk to each other, that's a big thing. That's cooperation.
Mhm.
What are exceptions to the problem? We always fight. They always leave their dirty coffee cup on the table, blah, blah, blah. Look for exceptions. When is the problem not as difficult? Well, we actually did have to sit at that committee meeting and for the holiday party, and we actually figured out a menu and everybody loved it. Okay. So then there are two questions within that. What do you have? It's the what question. So it's a description of what you have. And the how question, it's the process that by which you're doing it, whatever it is, successfully.
Yeah, like we always get in a conflict when we're doing this activity or we're at this place, but when we go to this place or we're doing this activity, we don't have that conflict, and that's what's already working. And so, how do we just do more of those things?
Exactly. And
Yeah,
people will say, oh, yeah, I realized. Yeah, when we did that plan, that menu, here's how we did it. Here's how it worked. And you keep drilling down even the tiniest things. One thing is we always meet in your office. Your office is always too hot and I hate hot. When we were planning that menu, we were in the conference room and it was cooler and I was so much more comfortable and I was more patient. The cool thing about this question is you never know what you're going to come up with and what you will discover. So Ellen Langer said something really interesting, and I may be botching it, but here's the idea: that if you don't like somebody, keep describing them, and eventually you'll come to something that you do like. I hate how blah, 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 blah she is, but she sure knows how to dress in a way that's so creative and so attractive. Or he is such, an idiot or a jerk, my two words. But I notice he's really patient when it comes to new employees. So that's the work.
yeah, that's a really tough exercise or interesting exercise to do with someone that you really are annoyed with. That just continue to describe something about them until you get to stuff that, all right, I'll give them that.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing, so we have exceptions. When does a problem not happen, or when does it happen not so severely? The other question is to ask, when are instances when your desired outcome is already present? So let's say we have a team that's really conflicted and there's a lot of tension. And what we want is a sense of cooperation and collaboration. So when did we get that? Well, the boss took us all out to the silly minor league baseball game. And, usually when it's like we're sitting in the conference room, who gets to sit where and who's near the door, has to get the coffee, blah, blah, blah. We went to that game and for some reason, everybody kind of put their swords down at the door and we all just went and we sat and we just had a good time. Well, that's the desired outcome. We collaborated, we cooperated, we all had a good time. So ask the two questions. What were you doing? And drill down really, really to the tiniest detail to discover what it was that you were doing that helped and how did you do it? Well, there was no assigned seating and there was no precedent. And in the conference room, there's always this precedent where the old people always sit where they sit and the new people, somehow have to fend for themselves. So now we get new ideas. So it's both exceptions to instances and what's already working.
One of the things that could come up with me when you're saying that is you said before about even conflict within yourself. And what I was thinking about too was, okay, I know that first thing in the morning, if I am going to respond to somebody and something came up, I'm just not I'm a little more frustrated first thing in the morning than I am after, you've been up a little bit, maybe had your tea or had some food or whatever, that then now I can process things with more thinking about what do I want? What do I want the outcome to be versus I'm just frustrated about this message that you sent me or this email that I got from so-and-so. And then I would have that conflict within myself of how I would respond. I mean, it had nothing to do really with the other person, but I know that at that time of day, I want to focus on when I'm at my best, which is after that bit of food or the tea in the
Yeah. And
morning.
see, I think that's a really good example that you don't have to figure out what the problem is. I mean, it's, you say you're better after the tea or a little bit of food in the morning. That's what works. You don't have to figure out why you're grumpy or, frustrated or impatient or whatever. Did you not get enough sleep? You're not trying to fix the problem.
Doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
exactly. It doesn't matter. You've identified what works better and how it works better, and you do that. Exactly.
Do
Yeah,
more
do
of
more
that.
of it.
Yeah.
Right, right.
So what do you have? What do you want? What do you have? What's our third question to ask to get us out of this stress
What's
loop?
next? The what next? And that's the third question. But you only ask that question. It's like the what next is what am I going to do? What shall I do? What might I do? What are the possibilities? But only after you have a really good definition of your shared dream. What would we be pleased to see ourselves doing together? What result would please us? You have your shared dream and you've already identified what's working, the exceptions, the instances. So you have a lot of tools to work with. And then,
Yeah, it seems like you have a whole robust garden of things to
yeah,
pick
that's
from.
it exactly. A whole robust garden of things to harvest. Exactly. Things to pick from harvest.
Yeah,
And then our trajectory goes from kind of a vague abstraction, we'd really like to collaborate or cooperate better together, and then come down in time to make it more specific and explore what would be slightly better in the near future. Let's say it's 7 to 10 days from the problem. And 7 to 10 days, you're not rushing into action, but imagine it's a little better. What would be a sign? What things would be happening? You walk, if it's in the door of the office, you walk in the office, 7 to 10 days, things have gotten better. What's the first thing you'd notice? So now we're getting down to the tiny details in your family. Let's say something did happen in our family and things were going better. What do we notice like next weekend? What would show us? What would tell us things are better?
what would be an example of this? What would be an example of this?
Super simple. And I bring this up from one of our assistant coaches. She had just a horrible time nagging her kids to fold the laundry. They were big enough that they had to fold laundry, and the clean laundry always ended up on the couch. And it was constant battle. And she came home one day and said, no, suppose there was something better. We were just getting along better. And in a week, somehow there was a sign that something was better. And it kind of dawned on the kids, the couch would be clear and we would be eating popcorn together and watching a movie sitting on the couch.
I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah. And it's the kids. She didn't have to impose it like nag, nag, nag. They just went, if the couch were clear. Now, they weren't saying if we cleaned it, but if the couch were clear. So they used mental rehearsal and imagined life a little better. They didn't say they'd clean their rooms. They just focused, we'd walk in the house, see the living room, the couch will be clear. And then they said, and we could eat popcorn and watch a movie all together. So
Yeah, and so when you're imagining that now, I'm not looking at the laundry to fold. I'm looking at that for that popcorn night.
exactly. Again, it's the outcome. It's the outcome. We'd be collaborating. We'd be cooperating with each other. That's the vague. That's the kind of abstraction. And what would be different? We'd be sitting together eating popcorn on the. We'd have a couch, a cleared couch, to sit together and do that. And then, so that's the question. What would be going on? What would you be doing? What would you see others around doing? What would tell you that you'd be making progress? And then, of course, then we telescope in from that abstract, collaborate, cooperate, whatever, to we'd sit on the couch. And then the vision is very real. The picture of a better future is very real. That's the time to ask. And so what's one tiny thing that we could do or we would be doing that would bring us just closer to that movie night? And for my friend, it was the kid said, Mom, we could fold the laundry, because if we fold the laundry, then
Yeah.
we get to do the movie night. It was the solution from themselves. It wasn't nagged. It was not the result of nagging. They just brought it up themselves with one very strategic question.
So that's fantastic. So those are our three questions. What do you want? What do you have? And what's next? Those are the three questions to get you out of this conflict stress loop that can lead to all kinds of health problems. So is there anything else you want to add here about these questions of the stress conflict
Yeah, I
loop?
wanted to add one other thing. So when you're having conflict with one other person, it's not, well, they'd be doing this and they'd be doing that. You can do that. But then the question is, and if they did that, what would you be doing? So you get to take a little bit of control of the situation, because it takes two to tango. So don't wait for the other person. Make a change. Smile at them. Say good morning. It's like it's a system. We're all living in a system. One change to the system shifts everything. And small changes make big differences.
Well, that sounds like a fantastic place for us to wrap up. If you thought this was helpful, hit the like or subscribe. We talk about solution-focused strategies like these three questions every week. And if you want to download our 29 Laws of Resilience, we have a link in the show notes here. And also we have a perceived stress assessment that talks about this stress loop that you can take and get a personalized score, insights into your body and mind and how they're responding to daily pressure. And if you want to learn more about our unique solution-focused approach, book a complimentary coaching session, visit staminalab.io and put any questions or comments below. We'd love to answer those. Thank you, Dr. Teplow. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Until next time, remember, you are your own lab, you are your own experiment, and you are your own best coach. Be well.